Today we will explore whether moderate to high intensity aerobic exercise can mitigate MS-related fatigue. First, we will start off by defining multiple sclerosis, which occurs when the body's immune system responds abnormally against the central nervous system, causing inflammation that damages the myelin, which is the fatty sheath surrounding the nerve. This causes neuronal messages to be altered or stopped completely. Alberta has the highest rates of MS, and there are 4 different types. We have relapsing remitting, which is characterized by relapses where new symptoms appear or existing ones are exacerbated. There is also primary progressive, which is characterized by a gradual accumulation of symptoms without defined relapses. Then there's secondary progressive, which follows a diagnosis of relapsing remitting MS, where the disease begins to steadily progress. And lastly, progressive relapsing, which is characterized by a steadily worsening disease state with relapses but no remissions. In addition, it is important to understand fatigue. Fatigue is a feeling of weariness, tiredness, or lack of energy, and is different from drowsiness, which is characterized by the feeling of needing to sleep, while fatigue is a lack of energy and motivation. In addition, one of our focus group participants emphasized the emotional and psychological side of fatigue being much more noticeable than the physical side, or being tired. We'll also be looking at aerobic exercise throughout the studies, which is defined as regular, purposeful exercise involving major muscle groups that is continuous and rhythmic in nature. Getting into the evidence, there were 2 main methods we discussed. First, continuous aerobic training, which is a type of training involving longer durations and lower intensity bouts. We have outlined some of the most common modes, durations, and intensities used for continuous exercise. As you can see, there are many different options that will elicit similar effects, so it is important to find what works best for you. The study showed a decrease in fatigue levels relative to the control group. However, the improvements weren't always sustained to the follow-up. This could be due to low exercise adherence following the study. Lastly, with an increase in endurance, fatigue symptoms were not exacerbated. Next, we will look at interval training, which involves alternating between low and higher intensity bouts. Once again, we have outlined some of the most common modes, durations, and intensities. Some examples of interval training included using stations with 10 minutes on and 5-minute rest between each set. Another study used a progressively increasing intensity regimen, starting at 40% and working up to 80%, followed by rest. There were pretty similar findings on the continuous exercise method. There were significant improvements in fatigue severity, and fatigue symptoms were not exacerbated. Similarly, sustaining the improvements in fatigue seemed to be a challenge. Overall, both methods demonstrated the importance of adhering to a regular exercise program in order to sustain fatigue improvements. As aerobic exercise is increased, you may be able to perform higher intensity training without worsening fatigue symptoms. And every person may respond differently, so you may need to try different methods before finding what works right for you. Next, we will get into the physiological side of this. Before we proceed, it is important to note that the majority of studies looked at self-reported measures of fatigue. Only a few studies looked at the physiological mechanisms behind fatigue improvement. Overall, 3 main mechanisms are identified for improving fatigue. First, fatigue symptoms improve with increased aerobic fitness. By improving the amount of oxygen your body can utilize, you are able to perform activities more efficiently, thus reducing fatigue. In addition, the increased levels of energy and vigor combat fatigue more than not exercising regularly. Fatigue symptoms improve with improved body composition. Higher levels of body fat are associated with increased inflammation in the body. When inflammation is higher in the body, the immune system is more active, which produces more symptoms in MS, including fatigue. Decreasing the amount of fat mass you have will subsequently reduce inflammation, thus lessening the immune response in MS. And lastly, fatigue symptoms improve with improved inflammation. Aerobic interval training can help establish a balance between inflammatory markers. The effects of aerobic exercise, particularly decreasing body fat, mediates the immune response by reducing the production of pro-inflammatory markers. Contrarily, aerobic exercise increases the production of anti-inflammatory markers, which also mediates the immune response. And in conclusion, We found that moderate to high-intensity aerobic exercise may be a good addition to your treatment regimen due to its ability to mediate the heightened immune response in MS. Participating in moderate to high-intensity aerobic exercise may reduce fat tissue in the body, thus improving body composition. This allows for daily activities to be performed with ease, thus enhancing quality of life. Physical activity was reported to be easier in the morning, as fatigue and symptoms worsen later in the day. And lastly, fatigue is largely subjective, making it more challenging to consistently measure in research. The effects of aerobic exercise on fatigue are individual, and each person may respond differently. In conclusion, these findings highlighted the key role of regular physical activity as a non-pharmacological adjuvant, contrary to the previous belief that exercise training had a high risk or could be harmful to people with MS. If you are interested in learning more, here are some additional resources. Thank you for listening to our presentation.